they do shame people who don't grab them or grab them and don't fulfill the vows. There's a lot of guilt tripping when it comes to that.
And yeah, I want to prosper. So on Monday, I'm grabbing an envelope. Yes, I need healing. So on Tuesday, I'm grabbing an envelope. Yes, I want the Holy Spirit. So on Wednesday, I'm grabbing an envelope. Thursday is the family or love life. Yes, I'm grabbing an envelope. And Fridays for deliverance, in case there's any spiritual attacks against me or whatever. Yes, I'm going to grab this envelope. Saturdays for justice. If you have a case that you're trying to fight or just an area in your life that you're trying to seek justice, yes, I'm going to grab that envelope. And then Sundays is just like, a special day to give offering to God, and whatever purpose is being presented on that day, there's an envelope for that.
This is the dark side of devotion.
Hey guys, welcome to the dark side of devotion. Thanks for being with us here today. First, to start off, I just wanted to say that our dear friend Sarah is having to take a step back, unfortunately, from the podcast. She just has a lot going on right now, and she is choosing a different path. And we are still showing her so much support and love, and we are happy for what she has contributed to the podcast up until now. And you guys might still see her periodically. Every now and then, she might appear for certain hot topics. So we are excited about that. But until then, you guys are stuck with us. We are continuing with this podcast. I hope that you stay along with the ride. Please press subscribe, press the bell button to receive notifications and not miss any episodes. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And I hope that you continue sharing this with people that you think, this will really help, people that will resonate with this. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. We appreciate all the interaction. We appreciate you guys just, being here with us. This is a project that is a lot to spearhead. I think I've mentioned that before, but I feel like it's necessary. There are a lot of people that on a global scale have been a part of this institution and have a lot of things that they need to process, a lot of things that they need to, come to terms with, a lot of things that can be confusing, to be quite honest. And we want to highlight and validate a lot of the abuse and things of that like that take place in the institution. Talking about that, today we're going to bring up a topic that is a little bit of a, how can I say, super popular when it comes to this institution. So when it comes to UCKG or UORT, depending on what branch, you found this institution, money is always a very popular topic, right?
It's probably the question we receive the most about on our page. Like every time I ask a poll or something, a lot of people ask about specifically, where is the money going? Like a lot of people are noticing, where the heck is the money going? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why people have so many questions about money and this institution is because it tends to revolve heavily around money, if I'm being honest. So most churches, they run based on offerings and tithes, right? So that's the main way that these places get funded. Offerings being voluntary donations that people give, and then tithe being 10% of your income that usually people would give to their local church, their home church. And it's meant to be able to pay the bills, keep the lights running, keep everything going. Which is all fine and dandy. But this particular institution, outside of the tithes and offerings, they also branch out into other ways of fundraising. So they have what's called campaigns or challenges of faith, right? So those are, for example, the institution is open 7 days a week. Mondays being for finances. Mondays, there's definitely going to be envelopes given in that service based on a Bible verse that's saying basically, if you sow a seed, it'll be multiplied to you. And people that are doing those Monday chain of prayers, which is when you go 7 weeks in a row on a particular day of the week, like a Monday, 7 Mondays for prosperity, they're bringing those envelopes on the following Monday service and fulfilling their vows and stuff like that. Tuesdays for healing. So if a person happens to want to prosper and be sick, they're probably getting another envelope on Tuesday for their health. Wednesday will be for spiritual growth, and they say things like, this is the most important area of your life. There are people that they're quick to grab an envelope for financial blessings or physical blessings, but never investing in the spiritual. So they might have an envelope for spiritual growth. And then Thursday might be for family. There's another one for that. So people that go all the time, they end up collecting envelopes like their Pokemon cards. Literally, like, you just have the whole collection. And the thing is that even though they'll say, oh, nobody's forced to take an envelope, they do shame people who don't grab them or grab them and don't fulfill the vows. There's a lot of guilt tripping when it comes to that.
Yeah, I actually have a story that I could share about that. It's at least at the time for me, it was very embarrassing. But it's like what you said, every day is an envelope. And yeah, I want to prosper. So on Monday, I'm grabbing an envelope. Yes, I need healing. So on Tuesday, I'm grabbing an envelope. Yes, I want the Holy Spirit. So on Wednesday, I'm grabbing an envelope. Thursday is the family or love life. Yes, I'm grabbing an envelope. And Fridays for deliverance in case there's any spiritual attacks against me or whatever. Yes, I'm going to grab this envelope. Saturdays for justice. If you have a case that you're trying to fight or just an area in your life that you're trying to seek justice, yes, I'm going to grab that envelope. And then Sundays is just like, a special day to give offering to God and whatever purpose is being presented on that day, there's an envelope for that. So especially in the very beginning, my mother and I being very like passionate members, we were taking like all these envelopes, and the pastor would even like say, oh, maybe you don't have anything and you want to take this envelope. Take it because God will bless you and give you something. You'll see that this week something's going to come in and you'll be able to fulfill with your envelope. So heck yeah, me and my mom would always be grabbing these envelopes. Like we always had the best of intentions, but could we keep up with them? Absolutely not. We were a broke family from the South Bronx. Okay, we were struggling to have groceries in the house. We definitely were not able to fulfill these envelopes. And 9 times out of 10, the envelopes had, I guess in English we would say stipulations,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. So sometimes the envelope, to be able to give it in, it's not just about putting $1 in there. Like this one, we grabbed it when the pastor had said $20. So we want to be faithful to God that when we grab the envelope, the pastor was saying, oh, who has faith to give $20 or $50 or $100, whatever the case is. And we would write with a pen, we'd write on the envelope, okay, this one is $100. This one is $20. I kid you not, we had like thousands of dollars worth of envelopes. At the end of the day, living under my mattress. Me and my mom would just,
Yep.
we had so many. We had so many, literally like 100 envelopes. And every now and then, periodically, the pastor would say, those of you that want to restart with God at a clean slate, bring in all your old envelopes. I don't know if, other branches did that, but at my branch, they had to do that because we were getting so many envelopes. And me and my mom, so ashamed, would have to be bringing in like bags and bags of envelopes and put it on the altar and things like that. Would be so embarrassed, but this was the reality. And I know we weren't the only ones. Like this was the reality. It was so hard. It was such a struggle to keep up because as people that had their hearts in the right place, we wanted to donate to the work of God. And also we believed in what they were preaching. So we believed in like challenging God and bargaining with God. Later on come to find out that if we think critically about this is not a healthy approach. This is perpetuating a sort of transactional faith where you're trying to pay God for blessings, even if you don't see it like that's technically what is being done. And that's, that you can see how that's being misconstrued and how shady business that is. But at the end of the day, I just want to say that it was hard. It definitely was hard. This whole financial aspect of being a member of the Universal Church, and it only got worse when you were an assistant and then moving on as a pastor and wife.
To your point, I want to say that as somebody who's now in sales, right? They do top-down selling. So when they give these envelopes, for example, Monday for prosperity, they might say, there's a psalm of prosperity. This verse says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This verse is number 23. So you're going to bring $23 in this envelope, symbolizing that verse, and it's going to come true. And so they'll do things like that. So, which is more like numerology than Christianity, by the way. But okay, they do like on other occasions, if you have faith to grab this envelope with $100 for next Monday to bring it in, you're going to grab it. Then they'll wait. And the people that are okay to do that, maybe you wanted to do 100, but you can't. Let's do 50. And then a whole slew of people will grab for 50, then 20, then 10, then 5, then 1. And then finally, if you say, Pastor, I have nothing, but you have faith that this week God is going to bless you and give you a way to be able to fulfill a vow next Monday, you're going to come here and grab this envelope. And then a huge slew of people with no money would come in. and grab that envelope. But the thing is here, these are impoverished communities. These people don't have a lot in the first place. And you have to stop and think that even if God blessed these people, they already are trained to think of every, financial blessing that comes their way. Oh, it's for me to give back. Like they're giving every blessing that they get, quote unquote, right, back to the church. So when are they going to build wealth? When are they going to buy a house if every time they get blessed, all the money's going into an envelope? When are they going to, move forward in life if they're not allowed to be able to do something with their finances, right? And these tactics, I don't think they should have a place in a church that is there to help people in their most vulnerable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I remember as a college student, with the money that I was getting from the grant that I had, I bought myself a laptop, to be able to get work done, my homework done. I had that laptop maybe 3 months before I was already giving it up for a campaign. Like it's true. Wealth building is very hard to do in that vicious cycle, because if you're constantly expected to be giving everything, your new car or even a house, like they'll have the gall to say, sell your house and put that on the altar, sell your car, sell this and that, your food, the money for your rent and all of this. Like this is literally the stuff that they're asking for. And if you're constantly doing that, how do you ever have a savings account? Because they'll ask for savings. They even ask for credit cards. Like they'll say, swipe right now your credit card, your whole credit line, and put that as your sacrifice. And the kicker is that during the campaign, like you're meant to do all of that. You're meant to do everything, to really give your all. You're meant to sell everything and give everything. And like over the years, I've heard like it being justified, like, no, God will ask of you exactly what he's asking of for this campaign. It's not going to be your house every time or your credit card every time. It's going to be something different every time, because it was getting crazy. But for a time there, it was expected to be giving everything. And even then, just giving that argument of like, no, God will tell you exactly what he's asking for. Even when you just do that and you tell the pastor, no, this is what I feel like God asked of me. I've seen pastors say, no, I'm sure that he's also asking for XYZ too. I'm sure you still need to give more. This has been very prevalent in the church.
And I think when you say campaigns, you're talking about like the campaign of Israel. So we were just talking about the weekly envelopes during the regular chains of prayer so far. So they have the regular tithes, right? The regular offering, the weekly envelopes for their chains of prayers. And now what Steph was referring to is known as the campaign of Israel, or the Israel challenge, which happens twice a year, one during the holiday season and one during the summer. And in those specific challenges or campaigns, they encourage their members to give absolutely everything. So, I've heard pastors go as far as, you're not paying rent this month. A pastor write a big no on a piece of paper and show it to the congregation. He's like, you're saying no to your light bill this month. You're saying no to the rent this month. You're saying no to child support. You're saying no to everything. And you're putting everything in this envelope, and God has to bless you. And they'll use all kinds of biblical scenarios to try to back that up. But every 6 months, if people are now expected to give absolutely everything, they ask for savings accounts, they ask for 401ks, they ask for, if you have faith to sell a property, if you have faith to sell land, if you have faith. I've had pastors mention, you're going to sell your Bitcoin. I've seen people put absurd amounts of money into envelopes, fighting for what to them is a dream. These are meant to be for big problems. If you have a problem that you've prayed, you've fasted, you've done everything you could, and nothing moves it out of your way, that's when you do one of these campaigns and you put everything in God's hands. And the thing with that, you know, huge amounts of money are raised during the campaigns of Israel. Huge. Like they put, I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but back in my time, if you as a member gave over 100K as your sacrifice for a campaign of Israel, you yourself would fly to the Holy Land that year to take your request. And so I know for a fact there were locations that brought in massive amounts of money. Massive. Like six figures is laughable in certain locations. So in these challenges, like people are left with absolutely nothing. they are drinking water for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, people are in the worst situations. And if a congregation of, let's say, 500 people, and most people are encouraged to participate, right? If you don't participate, you're looked at like you're not in faith, like you're weak, like you have doubts. See, that's why your life doesn't change, because this is what God keeps asking you to do and you're not doing it. So they play all these mind games, right? They guilt people into participating because they're just going through the motions, right? They don't really believe in what they're doing, but they don't want to feel left out. They don't want to be signaled out. And or they're going through such a hard time that they're just vulnerable. And it's easy to get somebody that feels like, for example, they're dying of HIV, to go ahead and give all their life savings to this place in exchange for healing, because they have nothing to lose, in a sense, right? Um, at least that's what they make them to feel.
You were mentioning like you have nothing and just water for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that gave me flashbacks because I was starving so much during those campaigns of Israel. Like I look back and I feel so sorry for that, Stephanie, because I was literally running on fumes, emotionally, mentally, and physically, because I didn't have money to eat. And even down to a quarter, all my coins, everything was getting put on that altar. And then even then, still dealing with a pastor that's telling you you're not doing enough. Oh, you should go out and sell more things, sell your clothes. So it was hard. And I feel so bad for people that are going through that right now. Like, you don't deserve that. No one deserves that. God is not impeding a blessing or healing to happen for you because you have money to pay your rent and you're buying groceries for your family and you're feeding your children and you're paying your bills. Like, that is not what's holding your blessing back. And you don't need to give that for God to move in your favor. It's so sickening too at the same time, because we know that this is a place that has so much and does so little for the locations. You'll see a location needing a certain repair for years and years later. Like, seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you especially the church tends to get these old theaters that need a lot of maintenance and repair. And you will see that barely much gets invested in it. And the ones that do get the most investment will be like the headquarters or the bigger churches. But even then, it's not like so much gets put into it. Most of it comes out of the pockets of the people.
They do the bare minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we've seen as pastor and wife how hard it was to have to ask people who are already struggling, people that we counsel on the regular. We know their problems. Like, we've seen their humanity. And then to have to be like constantly asking for money. That's why I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but that's why like you would even refuse to be asking for certain things that the bishop would tell you, oh, ask the people for this, and that. Or you would even not give certain envelopes because it was just too much. It was ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah, and then this campaign of Israel, even I want to preface it for people that aren't familiar. This is not like a one-day thing. This is a month-long campaign. So for 30 days, all you're hearing about is build your sacrifice. You got to sell this. If you don't have anything to sell, you're going to go to the street. If it's summer, because there's a campaign during the summer, go sell bottles of water in the park or ice cream, right? If it's winter, people are selling hot chocolate, or they're doing whatever they can in the streets, all kinds of things. They're pawning their jewelry, they're selling, and their TVs, their electronics. People sell cars. People, like, once again, it's an all-out like mass recruiting for money, and it's not just the members in the church. Actually, the kid zones. So they start teaching these little kids as young as 4 or 5 to grab an envelope and start building their sacrifice. You see kids in the kid zone selling their Nintendos, to put money in an envelope. And they're being conditioned already from 4 or 5 years old to be used to giving every 6 months everything to the church. Like, as a member, I knew I would not be too into like the latest trends or phones or electronics, because I knew in like 3 months another campaign was going to come and I was probably going to sell it for my sacrifice next time. So it kind of took even from me as a member, like that desire to get better things or to move forward, because I knew that it was just going to be back to square one. And a lot of people in the church feel that way. But within these campaign months, on the Sunday that people are giving in their envelopes, there's massive amounts of money that come in, like massive. Like there are locations that have well over six figures that come in on that one day. And the couple things bothered me as a pastor. One was, let's say that the service was 10 a.m., right? The leader of the state or the country wanted to know by 10:20, 20 minutes into the service, how much the campaign gave. They wanted the pastors' wives to send a report, already have the offering counted, and they want to know what those numbers are like. So a lot of the times, the pastors'
Mhm.
wives that also are building their sacrifice and have a request, they can't participate in that service and pray for what they're asking for because they're too busy in an office counting massive amounts of money, trying to scramble, getting phone calls from bishops' wives, pastors' wives. How much? How much? Why isn't this done yet? What's taking so long? As if it wasn't a whole church service. So it would be super uncomfortable as a pastor to have to start the service. All those who participated give their envelope now, like that. It was so disgusting. The massive, like, that fixation on the number as fast as possible.
Man, you saying that is like helping me process this in real time, because for the viewers to know, we did not like practice this conversation. This is literally, just real genuine
It's an
conversation.
organic
And
conversation.
yeah, and what you just said right now, that is so freaking true. During campaign days, you guys that are not in the background, it's like all they freaking cared about was how much came in, because in the background it's just rush, rush, rush. I never got to participate in those services because I always had to be already counting the envelopes, and the assistants know, at least some of the most like I guess higher assistants, they know the dealio, because they'll be the one taking the bag and bringing it quick to the pastor's wife so she could take it upstairs and count that money and give the report. And so now looking back, man, that's so true, because all that was being concerned about was the amount. That day gets marketed like such a special day, such a spiritual day, right? You're going face to face with God, and it's going to be a day to clamor out and cry out to God. And in the background, guys, it's all a distraction, because in the background, this is what's freaking going on. And a lot of people ask us, where's this money going? And the thing is, we don't know. There's zero transparency from the church. Even the pastors and the wives don't know where the money is going. It just gets deposited to some bank account, and only the really higher up leaders of the church would know where exactly the money is going. But all we can tell you is where it's definitely not going. It's not going into the little things that the church need, the repairs, the maintenance, the things that we're constantly having to ask for the people who already have sacrificed themselves so much. And we need to ask them for more money for these other things that are needed in the church. Just basic things that the church needs to run. So that's crazy.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, like, this is a church that asks more than the average church, I would say. Like, just objectively, regular tithes and offerings is usually enough for most places. They have tithes, offerings, the weekly campaigns, the campaigns of Israel. Outside of that, they have books, T-shirts, they have big sales. They sell movie tickets. Like, they market heavily for the church. They have soap operas that are out in certain news TV networks, right? And they encourage their people to watch that. So they're also getting money from, you know, these soap operas. Like, they make money even outside of the church donation, but also they do the least for the community. Like, I've seen, and usually in underprivileged communities, churches have, like, a soup kitchen, or they at night they open up for people who are homeless to be able to have almost like a shelter kind of situation. They have programs that give back to their communities. This place does not. When they do give, like, food to the homeless and stuff like that, like, they have their Angels of the Night program, right? Or Ángeles de la Noche if you're in Spanish, or Anjos da Noite if you're in Portuguese. So they have that, but all that food that gets given to the homeless people, it's the members and assistants who raise funds separately to pay for that stuff. In other words, like, if they put an assistant in charge of the Angels of the Night to feed the homeless, that assistant in charge is responsible to get that food that's going to be distributed. It comes out of their pocket. So, but the church likes to take pictures and take credit. Look at what we're doing. We're giving back to the community. They love taking the credit for these things, but it's not costing them a penny. This is just another way to get more out of their assistants, youths, and members. And this is the problem. So I would be okay if you ask for a lot of tithes and offerings, but you're also doing amazing things for the community and the world. But we see the
Exactly.
total opposite. And if somebody comes back after the campaign is over, right, and said, "Hey, pastor, you told me not to pay my rent. I'm getting evicted. Can you guys help me?" No. The church does not help you pay your bills. The church does not help you if you're unemployed, if you're struggling, especially if you're found yourself in one of those situations after following their advice. They'll tell you not to pay your rent, but then when you're in trouble over it, they'll be like, "Who told you not to do that?"
Exactly. Exactly. The gaslighting is so real in there because,
It's
yeah,
unholy.
yeah, like they'll be the ones to say not to do something or to do something. And then when it comes back around and it bites you in the butt and you go to them for help, they're just going to say, you take that up with God. That's between you and God. Like, we're not involved at all. So it's like the perfect system to maintain control and power and keep the people in the bottom where they are, in the bottom and impoverished, and essentially indoctrinated to continue giving all of their, effort, energy, and finances to this vicious system. Two things that can come to mind, since we were on the topic of the campaign. I have a story. So when we were just newly going to the church, like we were only a month in, one of the assistants there lived in our building and he was struggling to pay rent. And he was the main one who had been evangelizing my mom and everything. And him and his wife are both assistants, actually. And they were talking to my mom about the campaign, making sure she was participating, trying to find out sensitive information, like how much money she had in there. My mom was like putting her entire government check in there. And it was a good chunk of change. And the assistant, like I said, had been struggling to pay rent. And he asked my mom if he could borrow that money to pay his rent and that he would pay her back. So my mom took the money out of her envelope to give to him. And if I remember correctly, I was young, but I do think like eventually he did pay her back and all of that. But this is a huge no-no. If the pastor would have found out, my mom never told on him. If the pastor would have found out that an assistant had a member with like, I want to guess that there was at least almost $1,000 in there, maybe 800, 900 bucks, $1,000 in there. If the pastor would have known that an assistant asked a member to take that money out so he can pay his rent, my mom was not able to give the money on the day of the campaign, if I'm not mistaken. So that would have been so crazy. But this also goes to show the conditions of living of these assistants. Like, I was an assistant, so I understand
They're all
now where he was
struggling.
coming from. They
Hmm.
are so struggling. They are also hungry. They are also struggling to pay their rent. They are also like stuck in this vicious cycle. And it's not everyone's story, but I do believe it is the majority of the story, especially, at least from my experience in New York City. um that's what the majority of the example that I've seen. And the other thing I wanted to say was that I remember as pastor and wife, the campaign times didn't feel as pressured or stressful as when I was a member or an assistant, because we were told, at least I was told, right? Oh no, as a wife, you don't have to worry about sacrificing so much in your envelope during the campaigns, because your whole life is an entire sacrifice already. You gave your life to God, you're serving on the altar. So wives had a lot of nice things. I'm talking about, I was around wives, especially in Spanish, who had like $1,000 designer handbags, like, really nice things. And this was the norm. Eventually, I remember, like, maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years in, things changed. I don't know, maybe the finances of the church were like decreasing or something. They started putting pressure on us pastors and wives participating in the campaign. And one specific year, they called all of us one by one to ask how much money we had put in our envelope. And I remember the bishop's wife that called me, she was very kind. I can't talk bad about her character. I had other issues with her, but her character and everything, she was a very kind person. And she felt so bad asking me. She said, "Stephanie, I know this is wrong, and I'm so sorry. I feel so bad asking you, but I need to ask you because I need to report it. How much money did you give in your campaign?" And so, I had to tell her, I think we had given, I'll be transparent. I think we gave like $700 that time. Do you
Yeah, I think
remember?
we paid one bill. I think it was just so the car wouldn't get towed, and everything else was in there.
Yeah, yeah, our whole check. So, we didn't have savings or anything like that. So, yeah, we literally gave all of that. She was like, "Okay, thank you," and that was that. But I just felt like, damn, like this is so crazy. This is never going to be a never-ending story. This will forever and always be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that, and they got so desperate that yeah, they started realizing that by telling the pastors that their whole life was a sacrifice, that they didn't need to focus so much on that, they realized that they lost a big source of income, right? 'Cause the thing is, when all this money comes in, you would also assume like, and this has happened to me personally as a pastor running a church, so I'm going to put the example out there. Let's say a church, has their AC that's been struggling for a while, and it's $15,000 to fix the AC. Well, the day of the campaign comes and your branch, let's say, brought in 100K, you would assume that that AC is as good as fixed because we tell people, or we used to tell people, everything you give here is for the work of God. Except that now, if I go tell my leader, the pastor or the bishop, hey, my AC isn't working, he would say, okay, it's 15 grand. Gather the groups, gather the assistants, the youths, and ask for a special offering on the side. When you raise up enough money to pay for that AC, let me know so I can put the order in. So the branches, they were not seeing the benefit from having those offerings poured into the church, if that makes sense. The church a lot of the time is neglected. These same people that are so dedicated into helping, the church expand through their money, they don't get to see like that care and consideration poured back into their location. And you get people every once in a while. If you're a member, you probably noticed, hey, there's never any hot water, for example, right? Or hey, these light bulbs have been dead for a long time. Or hey, that microphone has been dead for a long time. The sound system isn't good here. There's all these things that should be taken care of, considering the amount of money that comes through these locations on a monthly basis, but never get taken care of. And we don't know where the money's going to, because it's definitely not getting poured back into the locations unless it's one of the major ones or a newer branch that's being invested in. But after that first inauguration, there's usually not much more investment that goes back into it unless it's absolutely like no other way around it.
Yeah, like I want to bring up the topic of transparency because and I think we might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but it's even more relevant now, where a lot of people, especially if the universal church is the only church you've known, you'll think that it's normal for a church to not be transparent, as I did, because it was like the only church I've ever known besides the Catholic Church, but that's completely different. But after we left and we started going to other churches, and specifically this other one that we started attending and started volunteering in this church, we got, involved with another church. We got to see how this other church ran and other churches like it. And it is completely different. You guys would be shocked to know that transparency is the norm. It is supposed to be the norm among churches. Like this specific church, at the end of every month, the pastor in charge of the entire state and his wife, they would make a video and they would describe all the funds that came in from the tithes, from this, from that. Well, honestly, there wasn't even a lot of options. It was either tithe or like donations. It wasn't like the universal church out here where it was like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and campaigns of Israel and all this stuff. But yeah, and he would be so transparent. This amount of money went towards this. And then we were able to help out this organization and this charity. And we had this program this month. And so this much money went into that. And they would actually show footage of the stuff they were doing, like amazing, amazing stuff. And does the Universal Church have the capability, the capacity to do this? Absolutely, they do. Macedo is $1 billion religious leader in the world by Forbes. He's one of the most wealthiest religious leaders, in modern day. Absolutely, the church has the capacity to do this type of work, especially in such big cities like New York City and Los Angeles and a lot of Houston, a lot of metropolises all over the country where the church is. We don't see this. We don't see this type of action. We don't see this type of charity. So it just begs to question, where is the money going? Pastors like to say we're opening new locations to help out people there. Okay, but what is helping out? Just having the church open, having people come in for prayers? Like, at the end of the day, we just see people getting stuck in a vicious cycle, in this vicious system. And so much of this could be poured into programs and actual charitable work that you would think Christians would be doing to help people, especially if they're localizing themselves amongst these impoverished communities. You would think that it's so that they can help even more. But honestly, what we're seeing is the exploitation of these already very vulnerable people, unfortunately.
Exactly. And that's it's unacceptable. Like it's crazy for me to think like all the things that members and volunteers pay for that the church should already have paid. For example, like the Lord's Supper, which is usually the bread and the wine or the grape juice, right? You would think that the church can afford more than enough Lord's Supper elements, right? With the offering that comes in. But no, oftentimes it's volunteers and assistants. They get asked, hey, who can bring bread or grape juice for the Lord's Supper coming up? Why? That's something so essential, or something so like it's a basic for a church, right? The elements for the Lord's Supper, like that should already be provided. Why are we asking the volunteers who have already given their tithes, offerings, weekly envelopes, and campaign this month to now bring in bread and grape juice? It got so far that the pastor, he would preach, if you're getting food stamps, the reason why your life isn't moving forward is because you're not separating the 10% from those food stamps. And he would have these, on government assistant families take away from, their kids to go buy snacks for the kids zone, for example, or to go buy grape juice or extra virgin olive oil for the anointing and the services. And it's crazy. Like, why is the offering and tithes not enough for these basic church needs? Like you were mentioning earlier, like no toilet paper. Why are the members being asked to now bring in toilet paper when they've already given so much? Like, where is this money going? Like, why is it that everything that needs to get done has to come out of their pockets, and nothing can ever come from the church funds that are there for that purpose?
Right. On that topic, about the food stamps, because we're talking about tithing, right? So when it comes to the tithe, you got to give the first 10% of everything that falls in your hands, whether that's your check, food stamps, everything. So yeah, my mother was taught that your food stamps, she should be separating the first 10% and buying those type of things, whether it's snacks for the kids zone or olive oil for the church, bread and grape juice. And on top of that, my mom was so faithful that she would do that little grocery list first and make sure that the cashier processed that first and swipe the card with just that first, because she really wanted to be like, God, I gave you the first 10% of this, And there are a lot of people that do that. And were our food stamps even enough for a month-long groceries for us? No, it wasn't. So on top of that, we're taking 10% away, to help out this church that can buy their own snacks and buy their own things for the kids zone, for the Holy Supper and all of this stuff. But again, this comes from the people that are already struggling. And I've seen people like my mother and many others do this type of stuff. And is there joy in giving? There is, because those of them who have their heart in the right place, they are giving from a place of love. But when it's this consistently having to take from where you don't have, it's hard to come out of that vicious cycle of poverty. Because at the end of the day, you do need to be a good steward of your finances, and you do need to, use your critical thinking skills on how you're going to use your money. But unfortunately, there are people that are very indoctrinated to thinking, no, all of this has to go to God, and they equate that with giving it all to the church and putting that on the altar. So we see that. And something else about the tithe is that even the tithe is not preached correctly biblically the way they preach it there, because many times they would say, oh, you're going to give 10% and here's an extra envelope, or you're going to give another 10% as your offering. So you're going to give your tithe twice. And they will kind of like do little gimmicks like that to get more money. But these are things that are not biblical, and people feel bad about not participating. They feel like compelled, like, okay, I need to do this. So I need to take this second envelope, or sometimes it would be stapled with an offering envelope. Or my favorite, when they would say, don't give the tithe of your check, give the tithe of the salary you want to have. So they're at that point, it's not even the tithe anymore. of what you're receiving.
Another
It's-
campaign.
Exactly, essentially. So you start to see like, okay, there's just a lot of gimmicks here on how to extract more funds from the people. If you look at it from that lens, you can see it very clearly.
Yeah, they have a lot of gimmicks is the best word I could use to describe it. They're very gimmicky when it comes to money. There's not a lot of like, I would say, like respect and reverence when it comes to looking at offering. It's become a lot more like a corporation, not like a church. And I say that as somebody who used to be behind the scenes. Like that's just the way it's treated. And there's more to it. Like for example, there's every week, I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but back in the day, every week there was a newspaper. So the newspaper is yet another way that the church makes money on their members. So they want to say every week, when the pastors go to the headquarters, they'll get their newspaper with testimonials and stuff like that. And they use that to pamphlet out and do outreach and get more members to come in, right? So let's say the church is a decent sized church and they get 500 newspapers a week. So the pastor then is going to go and say, who can help us, to pay this newspaper to save souls? If you're going to give $1, you pay for a newspaper. Basically you have to raise $1 per newspaper that you're getting in to cover the cost, but that newspaper is already paid for. The whole reason that it's been printed and is already in the church building is because it's paid off. Nobody's going to print it and then you pay me back later. And I'm not sure if here in the US that's the case, but I know in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, they own the factory that actually prints the newspaper. So they get double and triple profits because one, they get the invoices from the church. So the corporation that's owned by the church is making money on those invoices. Then they get people in the church to pay for those newspapers again, right? And like, come on. How many different ways of getting money out of the same core of people can you come up with all the time? And by the way, $1 for those newspapers is an absurd markup. Like if it costs 10, 15 cents to make a newspaper, it's a lot. Like it's an absurd markup at that. It wasn't even like the right retail cost of what it was, would cost to manufacture. So stuff like that is crazy. And then they'll push Macedo's books during the offering time saying, hey, this is a new book and we're going to go to the streets and give it to people that need this book, or we're going to go to the jails and give this book to people that need. And they'll start selling these books at 15, 20 bucks. They've already been paid. Once again, they've been paid off. That's why they're in the church building. And if the church really cared about these people, they wouldn't be asking their members and volunteers to raise funds to go do this work. They just go do it. There's no need to, play fake modesty when you have $1 billion leader.
If I can just add, when you mentioned the books, I have also seen pastors do, how do I say this? These books are already paid, right? Then like during an offering, an ask for offering, they'll lay out some books on the altar and they'll say, who can buy a book for us to give out for free to somebody? So there are people, and they'll say that the book is $30 or $20, totally not worth $30 or $20, but okay. And they're really good-hearted people that will go and put in the money in the bag and say like, here, this is a free book you guys can give out. And then I'll see those very same books get put right back in the piles where they came from. And then later on, they get put back on the with the same gimmick again, like, oh, who can pay, for us to give out these free books? The books were already free to begin with. You already sold them a second time. Now they're getting sold a third time, and God knows how many more times the same book got sold. It's freaking ridiculous.
And then on top of that, a lot of those like churches, they have boxes and boxes of book behind the altar just rotting there that people have donated to go distribute to save souls, or Bibles. I don't know how many Bibles they've also put out there that they raise funds to go give them out. This should not be a thing that churches are raising funds to do. If they want it, really the word of God in people's hands, they should just go out there and do it. They have the money for it. And people need to start opening their eyes to these things and stop just taking what they're saying at face value and really pay attention, because these things are there and they're clear to see if you stop and just are real with yourself about what you're looking at and how things sound. Funny enough, like there's a lot of people that they're very smart and alert, and they catch a lot of like red flags on their day to day, but they put their blinders on when it comes to religion, or when it comes to something that they deem as holy, or we don't talk about that, or they have this, they tiptoe around certain subjects like, oh no, they would never. Yes, they would. And I'm not saying that all the pastors that are doing this have bad intentions, because I was a pastor and I had to follow orders. Like in that institution, you can't just do whatever you feel like doing. If your leader tells you, hey, you're selling these books today and your church needs to sell 500 of these books, and you're not up on the quota, like you can lose your church over something like that. You can you're seen as somebody that doesn't love souls if you don't dedicate yourself to hitting these metrics. And that's how these pastors take it. So I'm not even trying to paint them to be the bad guys, but my main concern is who is in charge of how the church handles their finances, really. Because whoever it is, they're doing the poorest job that can be possibly done. They're doing the bare minimum for their people. They're just stockpiling cash. And it's very sad to see that those same people that are being taken advantage of, they hear somebody like me and Steph say something like, be careful with where your money goes. And they're trained and conditioned to look at us as the bad guy. No, the devil's there trying to, steal your faith. By all means, if you want to sell your car, your house to your church, in the next coming campaign, go ahead. What I'm telling you is that God doesn't need your house or your car, and neither does the church, if I'm being honest with you.
One thing I want to say is giving is such a beautiful thing. And that is not what I'm trying to say at all about like, don't give. No, giving is such a beautiful thing. But I think definitely be more intentional about where you're giving and where you're pouring into. Because you can give and pour into other places and organizations and charities that are actually using their money to better the world, to help people that are really in need. And so if you feel touched to continue paying your tithes, to continue giving offerings, please consider doing research and finding a place that you believe would really use these funds for something good, and not just let it sit in someone else's bank account, not getting poured back into its communities or its own churches, sadly. So just honestly listen to yourself, listen to your own communion with God and your own spirituality as to what and how you should be navigating these situations. Just constantly doing whatever it is that the pastor is telling you to do is what's providing the results you have today. And if that's not the results you want, then maybe you should try doing something different. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think that if somebody's hearing this and they are a member or were an ex-member, their knee-jerk response might be, I don't care what they do with their money. That's their problem. That's between them and God. I'm keeping my eyes on Jesus. I'm just giving because I'm following the word. To that like train of thought, I say, if you really have the intention of giving to the house of God because you care about people and you want to see people's lives change and transform, I totally understand that sentiment. But also, if the place that you're giving to isn't really using the funds that you are donating in the best way possible, you should have a problem with that, because it takes a lot to earn a dollar nowadays, especially, right? Like the money doesn't grow on trees, and you should be assessing which place would use my money in the best possible way, right? Which place has their heart in the right place when it comes to that? Because I feel like in this institution's case, they prioritize opening more locations and buying more radio program times or TV programs. Like they prioritize putting themselves out there more over actually helping people. So it's something to think about. It's not just about self-promotion, it's about actually giving back, like doing the things that you read about in the Bible, right? Not just talking about them real nice and letting your volunteers get milk dry. So I think it says a lot about the leadership that they think that this is okay to do. and to continue doing.
And sorry, before we wrap up, I did remember one thing I wanted to mention. As a pastor's wife in Texas at the time, we were visiting a women's, not a women's shelter, a women's shelter, but it was for young teens actually. And I wanted to show up. I got put in charge of like kind of the project, and I wanted to show up with little gift bags and everything. And like the bishop's wife had wanted me to raise funds. And I remember, I largely paid for, well, I should say you, because you were the one getting paid that time. You were the only one getting paid that time. You largely paid for all the supplies and everything. I think I made like 20 gift bags, like little toiletries, deodorants, things that were allowed for us to come in with, but things, to really uplift these ladies and these girls and really uplift them and help them, motivate them, encourage them. I came with like an activity and a word and everything. And it was so fun. And I did it with Gollywood and with other wives, but it just goes to show how that's something the church should have paid, should have funded. And I know a lot of wives that it comes out of their own pockets, or should I say out of their husband's pockets, paying for any type of like little cute detail or thing that you want to do for the assistants, or for like this was a women's shelter, or just whatever it is that you wanted to do. The church wouldn't pay for it. You would pay for it. And even us going to a women's shelter, I just want to put out there, it was a Gollywood task, not a church thing. With Gollywood, there was a little bit more of conscientiousness, I guess, about giving back to the community. I do want to say that, but it was not like a huge part of Gollywood, but it was like the first time and the only time in the Universal Church that I felt like there was any type of like secular outreach going on, like external outreach, and like going into these women's shelters, knowing very well that they wouldn't be able to show up because they're stuck in a shelter, and us just giving of our time and our energy and our love. So I did want to mention that, but it's all funded by us at the end of the day, not by the church.
I would say to that, in this particular case, in that case, once again, it was funded by us, but I guarantee you that all the pictures or videos that were taken that day was marketed as if the church did this for these ladies. So it's all about publicity. It's all about image. It's all about appearance. It's not about actually doing the work, which is worrisome, because it's crazy because they love taking the credit for the outreach. They know it's necessary for a church to have that appearance, but they will not fund it. It's going to continue to come out of the pockets of the volunteers, of the assistants, of the pillars in the church. And it's gross to me. It's gross to me because they love, once again, looking good. And I'll leave it at that. I hope you guys have a good one and join us for the next one.
Bye, guys.
Peace.